Hi, welcome to On Air. I'm Clara Sturevich. Unless you're a minor or have a very creative accountant keeping you blissfully unaware, it's tax season, a perfect time to examine what's broken in the global tax system and how it ties into the trade war. Meanwhile, our report will take us somewhere truly exotic. No, it's not a tax haven in the Bahamas, but outer space. At a recent press conference, Trump's Health Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. lamented that autistic people will never pay taxes. I won't unpack the layers of idiocy in that remark, but I think we can infer where he got that idea. This guy, diagnosed as being on the autism spectrum, is really not keen on paying any taxes, domestically or internationally. A follow-the-money investigation suggests Tesla has been funneling profits through the Netherlands. Its Amsterdam subsidiary, on paper, a giant car factory, pulled in 26 billion euros last year, nearly a third of Tesla's global revenue. Except no cars are being built there. And Tesla pays almost no corporate tax in the Netherlands, despite turning a profit for the last 14 years. Individually, Elon Musk, like many billionaires, has somehow paid zero US taxes year after year. His support for Trump and his hefty GOP donations underscore their alignment on one key issue, a predictable opposition to increasing taxes on the wealthy. They both push to defund the Internal Revenue Service to increase efficiency. The logic is impeccable. Make cuts to law enforcement, crime rises, defund the IRS, tax evasion soars. The agency has lost millions despite clear evidence that enforcement expenditure yields far more in recovered taxes. So, billionaires like Musk don't pay taxes, nor do their companies. How is that even possible? First, let's explain how they do it, then look at the broader implications and how those feed into the trade war. Tax laws differ between the US and Europe, but the playbook is similar. Wealth gets taxed far less than labor. Yet nowhere is this gap more glaring than in the US. As Warren Buffett famously said, he pays a lower tax rate than his secretary. The ultra-rich build wealth from assets, stocks, real estate, a Dutch master, sports teams, you name it. These assets aren't taxed until sold, and even then, the tax rates are often lower, a maximum of 20%, than those on wage income at 37%. Jeff Bezos, when he was CEO of Amazon, had a salary of around $80,000 a year, less than $6,000 a month after tax. Musk doesn't take a salary from Tesla, but is currently fighting to keep a stock options package worth nearly $56 billion. Last year, a judge annulled it, calling the sum unfathomable. Meanwhile, despite Tesla's record-breaking revenue of $97.7 billion in 2024, the company paid no federal tax that year and just 0.4% in corporate taxes in the previous three. But it's not just Tesla draining US coffers. Global tech giants like Amazon, Google, and Meta are reaping huge profits that are difficult to tax because of outdated laws designed for brick-and-mortar businesses, not the digital age. According to the Fair Tax Foundation's 2025 report, Amazon, Meta, Netflix, Alphabet, Apple, and Microsoft have avoided $278 billion in US corporate taxes over the past decade. Despite $11 trillion in revenue and $2.5 trillion in profits, they paid an average rate of 18.8% when the statutory rate is about 29.7%. Europe, which prides itself on its social model and fairness, is now embroiled in an increasingly complex dispute related to these companies' tax evasions, given they make a large portion of their profits on the continent. 8 EU countries have introduced a digital services tax, but the lack of consensus across the bloc has created a patchwork of rules. Not to mention some countries, we're looking at you, Ireland and Luxembourg, are used as tax havens by those very corporations. So, in theory, this should be common ground for the US and the EU. Instead, the Trump administration has threatened retaliatory tariffs if the EU targets tech giants. But why all the saber-rattling if the EU can't even tax them effectively? Well, the EU may not agree on digital taxes, but it does align on regulating the behavior of big tech, especially around competition and content moderation. The Digital Markets Act and Digital Services Act have already led to fines for Apple, Meta and Google over unfair practices. Now, two enactments of such rulings are feeding a broader trade dispute. Further complicating things, the EU's anti-coercion instrument, the so-called trade bazooka, could use levies on digital ad revenues in response to Trump's announced and temporarily suspended tariffs on EU exports. So this would be yet another form of financial pressure on big tech, this time via trade policy. The EU is now walking a tightrope, pushing for fairer practices while trying to preserve its trade ties with the US. It may not wield retaliatory tariffs or improvise any new taxes on these giants, but it does look set to punish them financially nonetheless by applying the DMA and DSA. So, Mark and Jeff and Elon may not like paying taxes, but they soon may have to pay fines, especially Elon, given X's growing reputation as a hub for bots, disinformation, and algorithms pushing his preferred content himself. In fact, it has already happened elsewhere. Musk's platform was blocked for 2 months in Brazil, despite its 22 million local users, by the Brazilian Supreme Court. Musk kept on fuming noisily, but eventually backed down, paid the fine, and appointed a local representative as required by law. Even though US-based data centers, cloud services, and AI have limited alternatives in Europe, their providers also lack a comparable market for their services. They have too much to lose, especially with the ongoing trade war with China already taking its toll. It's interesting how Trump has criticized the EU's tax system to justify the trade war, yet many economists argue that tariffs are essentially a very large tax on US consumers. Trump's tariff war is based on the idea that it will encourage foreign companies to move production to the US to avoid the tax. But for countries like Côte d'Ivoire, which relies on cocoa for 3/4 of its exports to the US, and is slapped with a 21% tariff, or Ethiopia, which exports coffee now with a 10% tariff, how does that even make sense? Cocoa can't be grown in Alabama, unless climate change works a miracle, of course. So besides the wretched poverty they will generate in those countries, tariffs just amount to a tax on your latte. That's it. You'll be paying more for coffee or chocolate. And who will bear the brunt of this? People with lower incomes, because they spend a larger share of their paychecks on everyday necessities like food, clothing, household items, and electronics, many of which come from China or countries that produce raw foodstuff. Meanwhile, Trump has made no secret of his disdain for European taxes, particularly the dreaded VAT. He even signed a memorandum calling it an unfair, discriminatory, and extraterritorial tax. I was tempted to say extraterrestrial. According to him, it gives European exporters an unfair advantage since they're exempt from VAT when selling to the US, while the US has to pay it when selling to the EU. So what exactly is VAT? It replaced the purchase tax introduced during World War II to fund the war effort. The purchase tax was only charged at the final sale from retailer to consumer, which created a loophole for tax avoidance, because if someone claimed not to be a consumer, they could buy goods tax-free. Interestingly, today's tariffs might eventually lead to similar avoidance schemes, from smuggling to claiming a product was manufactured in the US while, say, only the final assembly was done there. Anyhow, the VAT closed such loopholes because it's applied in small increments at every stage of the supply chain. So suppliers, manufacturers, distributors and retailers all contribute along the way. Currently, 170 nations, including all OECD countries, use VAT, with the notable exception of the US, which stands alongside countries like Cuba, North Korea, Somalia, South Sudan and Yemen in not adopting it. Instead, the US relies on a sales tax at the local level, where each state sets its own rate. This leads to discrepancies. Louisiana charges 10.12%, Wisconsin 5.7%, and 5 states have no sales tax at all. It's quite messy. Moreover, the sales tax is only applied at the final retail stage, meaning it impacts consumers directly and only when a product or service is purchased. This also means that if goods are produced but not sold, they do not generate taxable profit for the country. Economists from Poland's PKO Bank have timidly suggested that introducing a federal VAT tax in the US could address several issues ostensibly targeted by tariffs, such as the fiscal trade deficit or the imbalance in trade relations. They argue that
VAT could permanently boost federal revenues by 7 percentage points of GDP. With its broad base and neutrality towards economic activity, VAT would likely create room to reduce other taxes.
Additionally, goods would be taxed consistently regardless of their country of origin. The VAT imposed by other countries on US exports, which the government views as unfair, would not apply. And then, even if Tesla wanted to dodge taxes entirely, it wouldn't be able to because under a VAT system, the tax is embedded throughout production and distribution. The steelmaker pays VAT for the value they add when they supply steel to the car manufacturer, who pays VAT for the value they add when they sell a car to a dealership, which pays on the markup it puts on the car. Lots of little payments, all adding up to 20%. A VAT system is harder to game and more robust than relying on taxing final profits that can be hidden, shifted, or massaged away. How's that for government efficiency, Elon? Space tourism is officially here, and apparently it implies wearing fake eyelashes if you ask Katy Perry and other fellow travelers of Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin rocket. But while we entertain ourselves in matching jumpsuits, someone else is trying to stake a cosmic claim on the moon's minerals. Find out more in this report.
1, 2, 3, take it up space!
In groundbreaking news, assuming groundbreaking now means celebrity selfies in zero gravity, Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin recently launched its first all-female space tourism crew aboard the New Shepard rocket. The star-studded team, featuring pop icon Katy Perry, TV host Gayle King, and even Jeff Bezos' partner Lauren Sanchez, enjoyed a 10-minute journey to the edge of space and back. But don't let the cynics fool you. This flight was definitely more than just a high-altitude Instagram opportunity. It also proved consecutively that women can indeed float aimlessly for a few moments while looking fabulous doing it.
I hope they can see the unity that we modeled and replicate that and understand that we weren't just taking up space, we were making space for the future.
Bezos isn't alone. Elon Musk's SpaceX is regularly ferrying astronauts to the International Space Station, turning space travel from sci-fi fantasy into an expensive commute. And speaking of cosmic ambitions, even Poland will soon be sending its own astronaut into space. Spaceman Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski will conduct an experiment on the ISS as part of Poland's first ever space mission, which NASA has confirmed will launch no earlier than May 2025. Meanwhile, China is busy eyeing the moon. But not for a photo op. The China National Space Administration unveiled ambitious plans for its Tianwen-2 mission to grab asteroid samples and scout lunar mining opportunities. They've been collecting lunar rocks, aiming to extract rare minerals crucial for next-generation technology. Forget gold or diamonds. Moon rocks might just be the next hot commodity. Beijing also sent out its Shenzhou 20 mission, carrying 3 astronauts to China's very own space station, as they work towards their ambitious goal of sending people to the moon by the year 2030.
Gotcha.
But it's not just billionaires in China making moves in space. Traditional players like NASA and the European Space Agency continue their methodical exploration of Mars and deep space missions. And let's not forget India's space program, whose claim to fame was landing on the moon's south pole, a milestone NASA and Russia both missed.
Space, the final theme park, or maybe the most frighteningly remote mining outpost. You decide. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.